Pinewood Estates looked like something straight out of a luxury real estate magazine. The entrance featured an elegant stone archway with meticulously landscaped flower beds that changed with the seasons. Every mailbox matched in that perfect shade of hunter green with gold house numbers. The lawns were all cut to exactly the same height, and even the garbage bins were concealed inside wooden enclosures painted to match each house. When Sarah and I first drove through the neighborhood 6 months ago, I remember thinking it all seemed almost too perfect. "This place is immaculate," I told our realtor as we pulled up to the colonial-style house that would soon become our new home. "Are people actually allowed to live here, or is it just for show?" The realtor laughed nervously. Pinewood Estates is known for its excellent home owners association. They maintain very high standards. The property values have increased 15% in just the last 3 years. Sarah squeezed my hand. Even after 15 years on the bench as a district judge, she still got excited about new beginnings. "It seems peaceful. After my surgery next month, this will be the perfect place for recovery." We had been planning this move for over a year. Sarah needed hip surgery. Decades of running had finally caught up with her, and we wanted a single-level home in a quiet community where she could recuperate properly. The surgery had a lengthy recovery period that would require her to use crutches for several months. Pinewood Estates, with its flat terrain and proximity to the courthouse, seemed ideal. The day we moved in, neighbors brought welcome baskets and introduced themselves with practiced smiles. Everyone mentioned the HOA within the first few minutes of conversation. "Make sure you read the covenant carefully," one woman whispered while handing me a loaf of homemade banana bread. "Karen does not mess around." I did not think much of it at the time. Every neighborhood has its characters. It was not until our third day that I met Karen Henderson, HOA president for the past 7 years. She appeared at our door precisely at 6:30 in the evening, clipboard in hand and pearls gleaming against her crisp white blouse. "Welcome to Pinewood Estates," she said with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "I wanted to personally deliver your welcome packet and review a few important HOA policies." For the next 40 minutes, Karen detailed everything from acceptable mailbox decorations to the proper storage of garden hoses. She spoke with the authority of someone reading constitutional amendments rather than lawn care guidelines. Throughout her monologue, her eyes darted past me, scanning our half-unpacked living room with obvious disapproval. "And of course, any exterior modifications require written approval from the board," she concluded, handing me a thick binder. "Even temporary ones." When Sarah hobbled into the room on her crutches to introduce herself, I noticed how Karen's gaze lingered on the medical equipment with obvious distaste. "Those will be temporary, I hope?" Karen asked, gesturing toward the crutches. Sarah smiled diplomatically, the same measured expression she used in her courtroom. "Yes, just for a few months post-surgery. I am scheduled for hip replacement next week." "Well," Karen replied, "just be sure they are stored inside when not in use. We do not allow medical equipment to be visible from the street." After Karen left, our next-door neighbor Tom came over to borrow a screwdriver. When I mentioned meeting Karen, his expression darkened. "Watch yourselves with her," he said quietly, glancing toward the windows as if she might be listening. "Last year, the Jacobsons put up a basketball hoop for their son. Karen cited them 14 times in 1 month until they moved out." Over the next few weeks, as Sarah recovered from surgery, I noticed Karen walking past our house more frequently than seemed normal for someone who lived 6 blocks away. She always carried her clipboard and frequently took photos of our property. The morning after Sarah came home from the hospital, I found our first violation notice taped to the front door. Apparently, the temporary ramp I had installed for Sarah's wheelchair, just for the first few days after surgery, was an unapproved structural modification. It was the first of many notices to come, and the beginning of what would become the strangest battle of our lives. Sarah's surgery had gone well, but recovery was more difficult than anticipated. The doctor explained that she would need to use crutches for at least 3 months, possibly longer. Our house had 3 steps leading to the front door, not a problem under normal circumstances, but with crutches, those steps became a daily challenge for Sarah. I watched my normally confident wife struggle painfully up the steps one evening after a follow-up appointment. Her face was tight with concentration, a thin S. Heen of sweat forming despite the cool evening air. That night, I drafted a formal request to the HOA for a temporary variance to install a proper accessibility ramp. The Americans with Disabilities Act should supersede HOA regulations, Sarah pointed out as she reviewed my letter. This is a reasonable accommodation. I submitted our request the next morning, attaching a doctor's note and architectural drawings for a removable wooden ramp that would match our house color. 3 weeks passed with no response. I called the HOA office twice, leaving messages that went unreturned. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to struggle with the steps each day. When I finally cornered Karen after spotting her inspecting a neighbor's flower beds, she sighed dramatically and consulted her clipboard. "Your request is still under review," she stated flatly. "The architectural committee only meets quarterly, and there are concerns about the visual impact of a ramp. Perhaps your wife could use the garage entrance instead." "The garage has 4 steps, not 3, I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "And the door is much heavier." Karen shrugged. "Rules exist for a reason. We cannot make exceptions every time someone has a temporary inconvenience." The day after that conversation, we received our second violation notice. Our garbage can had remained at the curb 35 minutes past the mandated removal time of 6:00 p.m. The fine was $50. 3 days later, another violation. Our grass was 1/4 inch above the regulated height of 2.5 inches. The fine was $75. I decided to address these issues at the monthly HOA meeting. Sarah insisted on accompanying me despite her discomfort. The community center was packed with residents, but when I raised my hand to speak, Karen dismissed my concerns almost immediately. "The board is aware of your situation," she announced to the room, "but we must remind all residents that purchasing in Pinewood Estates means agreeing to abide by our covenants. No exceptions." I noticed how other homeowners avoided eye contact. One elderly man started to speak up but was silenced by a sharp look from Karen. After the meeting, he approached us in the parking lot. "I am Gerald," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Been here 12 years. Karen pushed out my daughter and her family last year, kept citing them for their autistic son making too much noise in the backyard." Over the next couple of weeks, we heard similar stories from other neighbors. The Patels had been fined repeatedly for cooking odors. The Johnsons had nearly faced foreclosure over unapproved window treatments. Everyone had experienced Karen's particular brand of tyranny, but most were too afraid to stand against her. That night, I created a detailed documentation system. I installed a security camera discreetly above our front door. I started a spreadsheet tracking every interaction with Karen and the HOA board. I photographed our lawn, our garbage cans, every aspect of our property daily to have proof against fabricated violations. "You are thinking like a prosecutor," Sarah observed with a tired smile, as she watched me organize my growing file of evidence. "I learned from the best," I replied, kissing her forehead. "Something is not right here, and I intend to find out what it is." What I did not realize then was how quickly things would escalate, or how dangerous Karen would become when challenged. The day everything changed was unseasonably cold for May, with a steady rain that had been falling since dawn. I had an important client meeting I could not reschedule, so Sarah took a rideshare service to her physical therapy appointment, planning to return home around noon. As I sat in my office across town, my phone chimed with a weather alert warning of intensifying storms. I texted Sarah, "Do you need me to pick you up?" Her reply was quick, "Already on my way home. Do not worry." But I did worry. Sarah was fiercely independent, sometimes to a fault. She had been a district judge for over a decade, accustomed to commanding respect in her courtroom. Having to depend on others during her recovery had been difficult for her to accept. At 12:45 p.m., my security camera app sent an alert to my phone. When I checked the footage, my heart stopped. There was Sarah, struggling up our walkway in the pouring rain, balancing precariously on her crutches while trying to hold a small umbrella in her briefcase. And there was Karen, emerging from nowhere, her own large umbrella held firmly above only herself. I watched in real time as Karen gestured aggressively toward our front yard. Even without audio, I could see Sarah trying to explain something, likely asking to continue the conversation after she got inside. The rain was coming down in sheets now. Papers were starting to slip from Sarah's briefcase. Then it happened. Karen's face contorted with anger. She stepped forward and deliberately seeked the right crutch out from under Sarah's arm. The camera captured it all, the moment of impact, Sarah's expression of shock, her body crumpling to the wet pavement, papers flying everywhere. I was already running to my car when my phone rang. It was not Sarah, but our neighbor Elaine. "I saw what happened," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I have helped Sarah inside. You need to get home now." I broke every speed limit getting back to Pinewood Estates. When I burst through our front door, I found Sarah on the couch, her clothes still damp, Elaine pressing an ice pack to Sarah's wrist. "I am going to kill her," I stated flatly, kneeling beside my wife. Sarah's face was pale but composed. "No, you are not. That is exactly what she wants, an emotional reaction she can use against us. She assaulted you on camera." I was almost shouting now, my hands shaking with rage. "This was not the first time," Sarah said quietly. Elaine looked away uncomfortably. "What do you mean, not the first time?" I demanded. Sarah sighed. "She bumped into me at the mailbox last week, hard enough that I dropped my crutch. Then again outside the community center. I thought they might have been accidents, but now—" I started toward the door, but Sarah's voice stopped me. "If you confront her now, we lose our advantage. We do this properly. We file a police report. We document everything." Elaine nodded. "I saw the whole thing. I will be your witness." 2 hours later, we sat in the police station as Sarah calmly recounted what had happened. The officer took photographs of her bruised wrist and knee, then downloaded the security camera footage from my phone. They took Elaine's statement as well. "We will be contacting Ms. Henderson today," the officer assured us. "This is clear assault. You have the right to file for a restraining order as well." By the time we returned home, Karen had already begun her counterattack. 3 neighbors texted to warn us that she was going door to door, telling everyone that Sarah had tripped deliberately to file a fraudulent police report against the HOA. "She is saying you two are trying to sue the association," our neighbor Tom reported when he stopped by that evening. She claims you moved here specifically to cause trouble. Sarah listened to all this with the same careful attention she gave complex cases in her courtroom. When everyone had left, she turned to me with an expression I recognized, the one she wore when she had discovered something crucial in a case. "There is more happening here than petty power games," she said. "Karen is afraid of something. People this aggressive usually are protecting something important." "Like what?" I asked. "I do not know yet," Sarah replied, "but I intend to find out." What we discovered in the days that followed would shake the foundations of Pinewood estates and set us on a collision course that none of us, especially Karen, could have anticipated. 3 days after the assault, a hesitant knock on our door revealed Gerald, the elderly man from the HOA meeting. He glanced nervously over his shoulder before stepping inside. "I should have told you this sooner," he said, placing a thick manila folder on our coffee table. "But after what happened to your wife, I cannot stay silent anymore." Inside the folder were financial statements, meeting minutes, and emails, all related to Pinewood Estates HOA. As Gerald explained, a group of homeowners had been quietly investigating the HOA board for months, compiling evidence of financial irregularities. "We think they have been embezzling from the maintenance fund for years," Gerald said, pointing to highlighted figures that showed money flowing into accounts that did not match any community expenses. "But that is not the worst part." He turned to a map of the neighborhood with certain properties marked in red. "These are all homes that have received excessive violations in the past 2 years. Notice anything about them?" I studied the map. The marked houses formed a rough rectangle through the center of the community. "They are connected somehow." Gerald nodded grimly. "A development company called Brighton Partners has been buying these homes when people move out, always below market value. The company is registered to Karen's brother-in-law. They are forcing people out to consolidate property," Sarah observed, her judicial mind quickly processing the implications. "For what purpose?" I asked. Gerald pointed to another document, a preliminary development proposal. "Luxury condominiums. If they acquire all these properties, they can petition the city to rezone. The profit would be in the millions." Over the next week, I met with other homeowners involved in the investigation. Each had stories similar to ours: arbitrary violations, escalating fines, harassment. Sarah listened to each account with professional interest, asking precise questions about dates, specific HOA bylaw citati, ons, and the exact language used by Karen and the board. Meanwhile, the homeowners explained their plan: a class action lawsuit against the HOA for fraud, harassment, and breach of fiduciary duty. They had already consulted an attorney and were preparing to file in district court within the month. "We have been keeping this very quiet," explained Diane, a retired accountant who had compiled much of the financial evidence. "If Karen finds out before we file, documents might start disappearing." Through our security cameras, we noticed Karen and other board members holding late-night meetings at the community center. They looked stressed, their body language tense. Twice, I observed Karen in heated phone conversations while pacing outside her house. "They know something is coming," I told Sarah that evening, "but I do not think they know what or when." Sarah had been surprisingly calm throughout these revelations. While I had thrown myself into gathering evidence and connecting with other homeowners, she had maintained a thoughtful distance, reviewing documents but offering little commentary. "You do not seem particularly surprised by any of this," I remarked one night as I added new evidence to our growing files. Sarah looked up from the legal pad where she had been making notes. "Corruption follows patterns," she said simply. "I have seen similar cases before." "But this affects us directly," I pressed. "Are you not angry?" A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Oh, I am angry, but anger is most effective when properly channeled." I noticed she had been particularly interested in the filing details of the lawsuit, which court it would be submitted to, the expected timeline, the assigned case numbers. When I asked why these administrative details mattered so much, she merely shrugged. "I like to understand processes fully," she said. It was late that night when I noticed the corner of a document peeking out from beneath Sarah's side of the bed. Thinking it had fallen there accidentally, I picked it up and froze. It was the district court's quarterly case assignment rotation. Sarah's name was highlighted next to the upcoming month, which would coincide perfectly with when the HOA lawsuit would be filed. Suddenly, her calm demeanor made perfect sense. She had known, probably from the moment Gerald first mentioned the lawsuit, that there was a strong possibility the case would land on her docket. I started laughing, the kind of release that comes when pieces fall perfectly into place. Sarah stirred in her sleep but did not wake. I carefully returned the document and crawled into bed beside her, my mind racing with the implications of what was about to unfold. Karen had no idea who she had really messed with, and I could not wait to see her face when she found out. The morning after the police report was filed, the harassment escalated dramatically. Code enforcement officers appeared at our door citing anonymous complaints about everything from improper water drainage to unapproved plantings. Each visit ended with the officers looking embarrassed as they admitted nothing was actually wrong with our property. "This is the third call this week," one officer confided. "We have to respond to every complaint, but between you and me, this is getting ridiculous." Then came the certified letter. The HOA board had met in emergency session and determined that our ongoing violations warranted a special assessment. The fine was $3,000, with an additional $100 accruing daily until all violations were remedied. The letter also mentioned the possibility of a lien against our property if the fines remained unpaid. "This is blatantly illegal," Sarah said, examining the letter through her reading glasses. "But direct confrontation is not our best strategy right now." Her suggestion surprised me. "I think we need to appear to surrender." The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following evening. Despite my protests, Sarah insisted on attending, crutches and all. As we entered the community center, conversation halted. Karen sat at the center of the board table, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. When the floor opened for resident comments, I stood and delivered the performance of my lifetime. "My wife and I would like to formally apologize for any disruption we have caused," I began, my voice deliberately subdued. "We did not understand the community standards when we moved in." Karen's smile widened as I continued, explaining that we would be withdrawing our complaint with the police and promising to address all HOA concerns immediately. Sarah nodded meekly beside me, a perfect picture of submission that anyone who truly knew her would have recognized as completely out of character. "We just want to be good neighbors," I concluded, avoiding eye contact with the other homeowners we had been working with secretly. The drive home was silent until we were safely inside with the doors locked and security system activated. "That was nauseating," I admitted, loosening my tie. "Did you see how smug she looked?" Sarah's diplomatic expression melted away, replaced by the sharp, strategic mind I had fallen in love with. People like Karen make critical mistakes when they think they have won. Now we will see who she really is when she believes no one is watching. Our apparent capitulation worked better than we could have imagined. Karen grew increasingly bold, openly threatening other homeowners and discussing property acquisition strategies in the community center where our allies had planted recording devices. She mentioned her brother-in-law's development company by name multiple times. Meanwhile, our home became the secret headquarters for the class action lawsuit preparation. Neighbors arrived after dark, bringing financial records, correspondence, and testimony. Sarah organized everything with judicial precision, creating clear categories of evidence and identifying the strongest legal arguments. One night, I found her at the dining room table, surrounded by documents, her judicial robe hanging nearby for a court appearance the following day. "The filing date is set," she told me without looking up, "2 weeks from today." "And the judge assignment?" I asked carefully. Sarah finally raised her eyes to meet mine. "Initial hearings for civil cases filed that week will be in my courtroom." The implications hung between us. Sarah would need to recuse herself immediately due to the obvious conflict of interest, but not before Karen and the board saw exactly who was presiding over their case. "Is that ethical?" I asked hesitantly. "Absolutely," Sarah replied firmly. "I will follow recusal procedure precisely. The case will be reassigned immediately. But there is no legal requirement for me to avoid being assigned a case through the regular rotation system." A slow smile spread across my face. So Karen will walk into that courtroom thinking she has an easy win. "And discover that the judge she assaulted is sitting on the bench," Sarah finished, allowing herself a small smile. "It will be perfectly legal, procedurally sound, and absolutely priceless." The morning of the hearing arrived crisp and clear. Sarah had left earlier than usual, explaining she had preparatory meetings before court began. She had dressed with particular care, choosing her most formal black suit and the pearl necklace she reserved for significant cases. "Good luck today," I said as she left, both of us understanding the layers of meaning in those simple words. Through our neighborhood grapevine, we learned that Karen and the entire HOA board had received their summons for the class action lawsuit 2 days earlier. The reaction had been explosive: emergency meetings, frantic phone calls, and a parade of suits visiting Karen's house well into the evening. They had retained Martin Reynolds, an expensive attorney known for defending corporations and associations against consumer complaints. Our sources reported that Reynolds had assured Karen the case would be dismissed quickly, describing it as frivolous harassment by disgruntled homeowners. I desperately wanted to attend the hearing, but Sarah and our attorney had advised against it. "Better if they do not connect you to the class action yet," our lawyer explained. "You will have your moment later as a witness." Instead, I paced our living room, checking my phone obsessively, while 6 of our neighbor plaintiffs attended the initial hearing. Gerald had promised to call the moment anything happened. At 10:47 a.m., my phone rang. "You missed the greatest moment of courtroom drama I have ever witnessed," Gerald said, his voice trembling with barely suppressed laughter. "I wish you could have seen Karen's face." According to Gerald, Karen and the board had arrived at the courthouse projecting absolute confidence. Reynolds led their procession down the hallway, wheeling an expensive briefcase and loudly discussing how quickly they would dispense with this nuisance suit. They took their seats at the defense table, Karen whispering and pointing dismissively at the homeowners seated across the aisle. Reynolds arranged his papers with theatrical flourish, occasionally shooting reassuring smiles toward his clients. Then the bailiff entered. "All rise," he announced, the Honorable Judge Sarah Mitchell presiding. Gerald described the moment in detail, how Karen's expression shifted from smug certainty to confusion, then to dawning horror as my wife entered the courtroom in her judicial robes. Karen's mouth fell open. She clutched Reynolds' arm so hard he winced. "I swear she nearly fainted," Gerald chuckled. Reynolds had no idea what was happening. He kept trying to shake her off while maintaining his professional demeanor. Sarah, consummate professional that she was, showed no reaction to Karen's presence. She called the court to order and immediately addressed the situation. "Before we proceed," she stated calmly, "I must note for the record that I have a conflict of interest in this case. As I am a resident of Pinewood Estates and personally acquainted with the defendants, I will be recusing myself immediately." She then looked directly at Karen for the first time. "The case will be reassigned to Judge William Harmon, who will hear initial motions tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. This court stands in recess." As Sarah rose to leave, Reynolds finally connected the dots. Gerald overheard his urgent whisper to Karen, "Is that the judge you had an altercation with? The one on crutches? Why did you not tell me she was a sitting district judge?" Karen was apparently too shocked to respond. Reynolds' expression had shifted from confidence to alarm as the implications sank in. Not only was their case not being dismissed, but they had also made a powerful enemy in the local judicial system. Reynolds pulled Karen into the hallway, Gerald continued. "I could not hear everything, but he was definitely asking about assault charges and witness statements." Karen kept shaking her head and saying, "I did not know, I did not know." I thanked Gerald for the update and immediately texted Sarah, "How did it go?" Her response was characteristically reserved, professionally appropriate. "We'll tell you everything tonight." When Sarah arrived home that evening, she finally allowed herself to describe the scene from her perspective. "I have never seen someone look so terrified in my courtroom," she admitted as we shared a celebratory glass of wine. "Not even defendants facing serious criminal charges." "Did you say anything to her directly?" I asked. Sarah shook her head. "I did not need to. My presence on the bench said everything necessary. Besides, the legal process will speak much louder than any personal satisfaction I might have taken." She was right, of course. The damage was done, not through confrontation or revenge, but through the simple, devastating revelation of who Sarah really was and what Karen had done to her. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Sarah said with a small smile, "justice takes its course." News of the courthouse revelation spread through Pinewood Estates like wildfire. By nightfall, everyone knew that Karen had assaulted a district judge and was now facing both criminal charges and a massive civil lawsuit. The carefully constructed facade of Karen's authority crumbled almost overnight. The following morning, a moving truck appeared outside the HOA office. Two board members were seen carrying boxes of documents to their cars. When confronted by curious neighbors, they claimed they were reorganizing, but their nervous expressions told a different story. Judge William Harmon, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for ethical strictness, took over the case as scheduled. After reviewing the evidence, he denied the defense's motion to dismiss and ordered discovery to proceed immediately. Karen's attorney, now fully aware of the severity of the situation, advised the HOA board to consider settlement options. Instead, Karen doubled down. She hired a second attorney specializing in judicial misconduct, threatening to file complaints against Sarah for orchestrating the lawsuit. This strategy backfired spectacularly when their investigation revealed that Sarah had followed recusal protocols perfectly and had no direct involvement in the case preparation. Meanwhile, Karen's criminal assault case proceeded separately. The security camera footage, combined with Elaine's eyewitness testimony, left little room for defense. Karen's attorney negotiated a plea deal, community service and probation in exchange for guilty pleas to assault and harassment charges. 3 weeks after the courthouse revelation, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The community center was packed beyond capacity, with homeowners spilling out into the parking lot. The remaining board members, visibly uncomfortable, announced Karen's resignation as president for personal reasons. When they attempted to appoint another of Karen's allies as the new president, the room erupted in protest. Gerald stood and called for an immediate vote to remove the entire board under the rarely invoked emergency provisions in the HOA bylaws. "We have evidence that this board has violated their fiduciary duties," he announced, holding up copies of the financial documents we had collected. "We demand a complete audit and new elections." The vote was overwhelming. By the end of the night, an interim board had been established with Gerald as temporary president. Their first official act was to suspend all outstanding violation fines pending review. In the following months, the full extent of the corruption came to light. The class action lawsuit uncovered nearly $300,000 in misappropriated funds. Karen's connection to the development company was proven through banking records showing kickbacks for each property acquired at below-market rates. Judge Harmon's final ruling was devastating for the former board members. They were ordered to pay restitution to the HOA accounts and substantial damages to homeowners who had been targeted. The development company's land purchases were invalidated due to fraud. As for Karen, the consequences extended beyond legal penalties. The community she had ruled through fear now shunned her completely. When she appeared at the grocery store or post office, conversations stopped. People changed directions to avoid passing her on the sidewalk. Within 2 months, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. Sarah returned to her judicial duties after fully recovering from her injuries. She recused herself from any cases involving former HOA board members, maintaining the ethical standards that had defined her career. Her colleagues on the bench, having heard the full story, regarded her with newfound respect for her restraint and professionalism. 1 year after the confrontation in the rain, Pinewood Estates held a community picnic to celebrate the neighborhood's renewal. Under Gerald's leadership, the new HOA board had created transparent processes, reasonable bylaws, and a focus on community building rather than punishment. Sarah and I sat at a picnic table, watching children play on the newly installed playground equipment, something Karen had blocked for years, claiming it would reduce property values. "Do you think she ever understood what really happened?" I asked, watching neighbors chatting and laughing together. Sarah considered this. "I doubt it. People like Karen rarely recognize their own flaws. She probably still believes she was somehow the victim." An elderly couple walked by, the wife using a walker. I noticed the small wooden ramp that had been installed at their front door, one of many accessibility improvements the new board had approved throughout the neighborhood. "Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways," Sarah observed. "Not through vengeance, but through community action and proper legal channels." I squeezed her hand, thinking about how far we had come. "And sometimes," I added, "it comes through having the right judge in the right place at exactly the right time." Sarah smiled, her judicial reserve softening in the warm sunlight of our transformed community. "That helps too."